Welcome to another episode of the Football Analytics Show. My name is Ed Fang, your host, and on this episode, I am pumped to have Collin Wilson on the show. He is a senior writer at the Action Network, and he is a college football expert. Collin, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me back, Ed. It's one of my favorite shows to be on, and I can't wait to chop it up.
Absolutely. I mean, I got to think there's so much excitement about this first college football playoff for you, who's been invested in the sport for so long.
Yeah, I think there's so many questions that I have about this home field advantage. Is this going to mimic the FCS playoffs where home teams just absolutely dominate? Is weather going to be a factor? Is weather going to be a factor from teams that are from the South? I'm just because it's going to be cold, right? Let's just get that out of the way. It's going to be cold this weekend. I can't wait.
We're going to get into it. The Football Analytics Show is brought to you by the Power Rank Sports Betting Newsletter. Looking for some action on any given weekend? This is the free service for you, as 5 Nugget Saturday is my curated list of tips and analytics. To sign up for free, go to thepowerrank.com. That is my site for better sports betting information based on data and analytics. Once again, that's thepowerrank.com. Collin, before we get into the 4 games, maybe you could give us a quick overview for how you approach these games, for example, in terms of markets you like and then the numbers that you look at.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, they focus on one certain thing. They'll focus on props or they'll focus on anything. But for me, it's always been sides and totals, figuring out game flow, handicapping offensive and defensive coordinators, handicapping their personnel, their X's and O's and what they do. And is there some sort of avenue? Because I've always said this since day one. In the NFL, teams are so good, they can pivot, man coverage, zone coverage. They can do a lot of different things from series to series. In college football, it's not that way. There's a reason these coaches are still in college football. Usually it's because they're a one-trick pony. And if the puzzle piece on the other side can exploit that, then it's pretty easy to handicap who gets it. So I understand a lot of people do props. The props for me come from after I, handicap what the game flow is going to be when I get a side and I get a total edge, and then I can start focusing on rush and passing and all that good stuff.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you on the props. I've been doing more of that this year, and it's not just looking at a model. Like, you have to understand how the game is going. So it's good that you have to understand the game flow, right? It's just, I completely agree with that. Let's get into it. We got Indiana going to Notre Dame. I actually saw a spread, Notre Dame minus 10 plus when this opened. It is down to Notre Dame minus 7, total 51.5. Obviously, Indiana's been a huge surprise this year. Notre Dame has kind of done what we expected them to do. What do you see in this game?
Yeah, I actually agree with that line movement. I would make it around. I think the line's actually perfect right down there. And when you look at what Indiana does on offense, they just have this 3-headed monster rushing attack with Curtis Rourke and Justice Ellison and Tyson Lawton, and they like to run inside zone. And I always have to shout out Sports Source Analytics because they're like the only place that puts out what your run concept is, and you can see it from an offensive and defensive perspective. And Notre Dame's just been terrible at defending inside zone, and that goes back to their defensive interiors of Howard Cross and Riley Mills. They've just kind of been exploited on the ground, and that's what Indiana's going to do. But where Indiana gets in trouble is the closer they get to the end zone, right? I mean, the Hoosiers are sometimes they get there and they've made mistakes in the bigger games, right? Against the Michigans, against the Ohio States. If you look at them overall in their schedule, it's been a really soft schedule of defenses that they've faced outside of those 2 games. So you're going to see number 1 in finishing drives. You're going to see that they average 5.1 points per trip. But when you break it down into that Michigan-Ohio State game, you can see that there could be some problems here. So I expect Indiana to completely move the ball. I expect them to get into scoring position, but what they do down at the goal line is going to dictate if they're going to be able to cover that spread. With Notre Dame, they have a monster advantage in explosive runs because they're good at everything that they do. They run a lot of inside zone. They run man blocking concepts. They'll just line up and try to power you over with Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price. Jeremiah Love is on a burner right now. 3 of the last 5 games, he's had 2 touchdowns. And Indiana's had a lot of success defensively against the inside zone, 62%. But when you go into the big games, Ohio State averaged 4.5 per carry. Washington averaged 5 yards per carry. Maryland, 6.5 per carry. And when you look at that, you're thinking to yourself, well, this Notre Dame rush offense is elite. They have been making, plenty of holes, highlight yards, line yards. It all belongs to them. I think the line is proper because the difference here in the game is that Notre Dame in the red zone is the one that has the better resume of showing that they can bull you over from a red zone rush TD rate. So I like the over in this game too. I just don't see either of these teams from a run concept perspective being able to stop the chains moving. So, I know a lot of people like to talk, well, the number should be this, the number should be that. Frankly, I think there's going to be a lot of scoring opportunities, which is defined by possessions that go past the 40. And if I can prove that there's going to be scoring opportunities, then I'm going to take the over here. So my favorite play on this is the over, but I think 7 is the perfect number for this game.
My numbers agree with you on the over there. I'm going to have to take I'm going to be looking into that. I want to do my write-ups today. I did want to ask you about the quarterbacks. Curtis Rourke came over from Ohio. I looked at his numbers last year. They were decent. But from your perspective, following the sport as closely as you do, could you have predicted the type of season he's had?
No. And full disclosure at Action Network, we love Nathan Rourke at Ohio, and then we love Curtis Rourke at Ohio. We were our Rourke family lovers from the Ohio Bobcats, and I just didn't, and there just wasn't proof of what Cignetti's offense did at JMU, and he did at other stops that I thought Rourke would be able to replicate what has happened there. But listen, I'm not going to lie. I think it was week 6. I took a 90-1 Heisman shot on him because, he's getting getting protection. The offense is moving the ball. And if Indiana beats Ohio, that was my theory. If Indiana beats Ohio State, we've got a real Heisman contender here. So I think he may be playing a very small length over the top of his head, but it's real. What he is real.
Absolutely. I took a Curtis Rourke 20-1 a little bit later in the season on exactly the same thinking. Obviously, it didn't work out against Ohio State. Didn't have the best game, although it obviously looked worse because of some of the mistakes that were made by Indiana.
Do you feel like deer in the headlights kind of game against Ohio State, and then maybe they'll be more prepared for this onslaught of Irish that's going to be on top of them? I feel like Ohio State game was more of a deer in the headlights, big moment. This is our first time to see this because
maybe. I don't know. I mean, I think there could have been a little bit of that, but I think when you make a mistake on the punt, when you allow a punt return, I mean, those things happen, and they can happen at Ohio State, and they did. I think the thing that I'm thinking about is look, what is the true talent level on this Indiana team? They've clearly performed really well this season, and all my numbers say that. But, there's a lot of guys from JMU that probably weren't highly recruited out of high school, and Cignetti's obviously doing a great job, and we want to give him credit for that player development. But I mean, this is vastly exceeding the program expectation in Indiana, and that's the thing I don't know how to understand.
I tell you, not to sidebar Ed, but I am actually thinking this offseason of handicapping how much NIL money your budget is, and then maybe throwing that into my win total projections for next year, because it's such a, when UNC comes out with Belichick and says 40 million, I'm like, holy cow, Ohio State bought their team for 20 million and you're giving Bill Belichick 40 million. To me, it's a big thing. The last thing I'll say about this game in South Bend, you mentioned that putt against Ohio State. Indiana's, I got to give my praise to Bill Connolly, of course. He has Indiana 11th in special teams SP plus, and Notre Dame at 101st in special teams SP plus. That's another reason I think Indiana has a real shot here to cover.
Awesome. Let us move on to SMU at Penn State. SMU's had a fantastic season, winning the ACC in their first year in the league. Penn State is a team that I think is really, really good, despite their lack of winning games against top 5 teams. Market says Penn State -8 at home, 8.5 at home, total 53.5. What are you thinking about this game?
Well, for all my listeners of the podcast over at Action Network, I got laughed out of the building last July when I said I think SMU can win the ACC. They almost lost in Nevada, and man, did the hate come in. The hate came in fast very early in the season, but I'm proud of them. I'm proud of what they've done. I think this is probably where it ends. I hate to say that, but they're going to try to run the ball with inside zone with Brashard Smith. He's got 14 TDs on the season. He's really their entire offense. And when I say that, you have to break down the difference between a line yard and a highlight yard. And for people that don't know what that is, and the people that get mad at me for using advanced stats, a line yard is, did your offensive line make those yards? And a highlight yard is, did your running back make those yards? Well, the offensive line for SMU is 90th in line yards, which means Brashard Smith, the running back for SMU, he's doing all the work from himself. He's not getting a lot of help from the trench whatsoever. And when you look at inside zone, Penn State defends that extremely well, but the EPA numbers against it are insane. One of every 20 attempts using inside zone against Penn State has turned into an explosive. That's a 5% rate. That means that SMU is going to have some problems getting chunk yardage here. I think, they'll have some success. There's, Kevin Jennings is a quarterback who I've said could play shortstop for any Major League Baseball team because he throws the ball about 105 miles an hour. He has had an emergence of the new slot man, Roderick Daniels Jr. After their tight end, Russell Maryland, went down. Roderick Daniels Jr. really kind of took over that role out of the slot. He had his largest target share of the season here in the ACC Championship, 10 targets. He caught 8 of them. His yard per route run is over the explosive mark of 2. So that's going to be it. I think SMU is going to be behind the chains. I think if you like props, Roderick Daniels is obviously going to be the guy that they look at to hit. I think there's another problem for Kevin Jennings here. Kevin Jennings and SMU only saw man coverage like less than 20% of the time this year. Well, Tom Allen and Penn State, they've run it almost 40%. They've run man coverage, and that can really kind of throw off what a quarterback wants to do. And again, I think he goes short dump slants to Roderick Daniels over the middle. So it's also worth mentioning in this game, there's a stat put out by Sports Source Analytics called offensive momentum killer. And it's what do you do to shoot yourself in the foot? Like penalties? Do you miss field goals? Do you have turnovers? Do you all do all these things? And SMU is actually 83rd in offensive momentum killer. And that really goes back to one big stat. They're 131st in penalties this season. SMU has to play their cleanest game of the season just to get into scoring position here. So from that perspective for the Mustangs, I see real problems. Penn State, on the other, I see them go in the opposite direction. I mean, Nicholas Singleton has continued to lead the ground attack. He's getting better and better every week. He averaged 9.5 a carry against Oregon's defense. First time going over 100 yards since week 2. I think there's other things here to worry about. SMU was targeted big time by Clemson's tight ends. Brenningstool, Tool. There were 8 targets, 5 catches. And then I did a little bit of deep dive research against SMU's defense. You look at tight ends. Virginia, they went at the tight end 5 targets, 5 catches. Boston College went to the tight end 16 times for 12 catches. And who is Penn State's tight end?
Yeah,
Tyler Warren, right? That's the weapon that you really don't want to get. And then I think the argument for people that want to back SMU is like, well, we have one of the best pass rush defensive lines in the nation. I've got a stat for everyone. And people just want to throw up when they hear that Drew Aller could be the number 1 pick in the draft. He won't. He'll be top 10, top 5. But listen to this stat. This tells me he's ready for the NFL. 113 dropbacks this season with pressure for Drew Aller. 0 turnover-worthy plays. I think Penn State's going to cover. I think their team total over is definitely worth a look. I think Kotelnicki's going to be in his bag here. I do like Tyler Warren props. I also think there's a wide receiver, a wideout, Harrison Wallace, whose target share is growing and growing and growing. He had 8 targets against Oregon. I think Harrison Wallace props are going to need to be looked at too. And then one stat, Ed, that I'll throw out that I love and I've based a lot of handicapping on this year. Can your defense create a contested catch? It's just not, it's just kind of a lazy handicap to say, well, this team is really good in passing success rate. Well, does the defense get a hand up and make, the wide receiver work to get his ball? SMU doesn't really do that. They're 48th in creating contested catches. So I see a lot of problems for SMU here, and I think Penn State covers. I want some Warren props. I want some Wallace props, and I would probably take a Penn State team total over.
Excellent. Do you feel like there's a talent gap between these two teams? I mean, Penn State always putting guys in the NFL. SMU, I mean, they do, but
it's interesting you say that, right? Because I feel that quarterbacks that are RPO quarterbacks don't generally do well in the NFL, and they want drop back passers like Drew Aller, right? So it's probably just 2 different sets of players, and it's hard to gauge. Like SMU's completely overachieved, but they're also Miami, Florida of Texas, right? I mean, they've transferred in so many players from the Miami Hurricanes program. Right. It's hard to say that they don't have the pedigree, but but at the same time, I agree. Like from a defensive perspective, absolutely.
I as a Big Ten guy, living here in Michigan. I think James Franklin is a pretty good coach. He's had this team at a top 10 level for his essentially his entire tenure there. He got Vandy to 9 wins.
Yeah.
He gets a lot of hate.
Yeah.
What's your opinion?
Shout out to my partner in crime, Brett McMurphy, who has gotten me in front of James Franklin multiple times. He is such a nice guy in person. And then when you're wagering on Penn State, he can't control the clock. It makes me want to rip my hair out. Listen, I think the argument is like, who are you going to go get? Right. I mean, he is a great coach. If you want to just throw out the records against Ohio State, throw out the records against top 5, who are you going to go get? And I think a lot of these big time coaches are, like who is it that's really beating top 5 teams consistently? Who is it that's got a great rare? I mean, there's so much bitching about James Franklin and what he does against the big boys. Well, not everybody's Nick Saban and not everybody's Kirby Smart.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, and the same things for Ryan Day too. I mean, I cannot believe I've become the biggest Ryan Day apologist in the Big Ten territory, but like, I mean, that guy is kind of the same, right? He's putting top 4 teams out every year.
Yeah, but it's really the same day that Sark is kicking all the players off of the Texas A&M logo. Ryan Day is watching all his players get in fights about flag planting, so there's definitely 2 different types of coaches there. But you're right from a record perspective. I think Ryan Day gets way too much hate from a record perspective.
All right, let us move on. We got Clemson at Texas. Very interesting team for Clemson. They get wiped off the floor with Georgia the first game, but somehow managed to come back. Texas was the top 4 team in the preseason, have somewhat lived up to that. Texas is an 11.5 point favorite, total of 57.5. What are you seeing in this game?
Ed, I think I'm going to be the only person in the world with this opinion, and it's either going to be egg on the face of Collin or Collin's pretty smart. And I see so many avenues for Clemson here, and it's just shocking to me when I started writing up and deep diving this. I first off, when I was looking at what Clemson's offense is, it's like they couldn't run the ball against SMU whatsoever. 2.9 per carry. I thought Maffa and Klubnik and what they do, they'd be pretty good, but they had 27 rushing attempts combined, only 49 yards. And what saved the day really was Klubnik, 4 TDs, 262 yards. Finally, their freshman, Bryant Wesco, the freshman wide receiver, who was supposed to be as good as Ryan Williams, who was supposed to be as good as Jeremiah Smith. He finally is catching fire here, 11 targets, 8 catches. And then the tight end. And I think this is where we kind of need to handicap here is that Jake Brenningstool, it was just money when they needed him on third downs, red zones, 4 catches on 8 targets, 2 TDs. So Clemson's going to try to establish their run. And Texas has been, pretty average against inside zone and counter, which is what Clemson likes to do. And, I think it's going to come down to Klubnik and what he can do with pressure. Believe it or not, Klubnik, who had problems for so many years, when he's had pressure dropbacks, he's had 12 big-time throws and 5 turnover-worthy plays. And if you look at Texas, those secondary problems, I remember just pounding the table about, hey, Michael Penix is going to tear up this Texas secondary last year in the playoff. Well, Texas is 57th in creating contested catches, and they're only 83rd in total PBUs this year. So what I see is Brenningstool and Antonio Williams out of the slot there getting a lot of short stuff, moving the chains for Clemson, getting them into scoring position. I have no expectation they're creating explosive plays. They haven't been able to do it all year, and Texas has been so fantastic. I mean, they're either first or second in quality drives, defensive finishing drives. So the stats say Texas should dominate on defense here, but I'm saying, look, there are avenues. There's a little bit of wiggle room for Klubnik to work in a short field, and just move the chains and get into scoring position. The other side of the ball, I think, is where people are really going to miss the boat. This offensive tackle situation for Texas is degeneratively getting worse. They, had a problem with Kelvin Banks, their left tackle. He got hurt. He did not play in the championship game. The latest word is that he's going to play here. So his backup left tackle, Trevor Gooseby, if you look at what he did against Texas A&M, absolutely destroyed one of the worst graded linemen against Texas A&M. Cameron Williams, the right tackle, was the next graded worst lineman against Texas A&M. And then you go to Georgia the next week in the championship game for Texas. Williams, the right tackle, was the worst graded blocker, and Gooseby was right next to him at left tackle. And I say all that, and you're like, well, why are you focusing so much on this? Because the Clemson defense is good at one thing. They can't really stop the run. They can stop the run, but they can't really stop the run. But what they can do is create a ton of havoc, and that comes down to edge TJ Parker. He is actually fourth nationally, individually, in creating tackles for loss. He has 19 of them this season. And then you look at Texas' offense, and what do they want to run with Contravius Wisner? Love Wisner. They want to run outside zone. They want to go right off the tackles. They don't ever do inside zone. They wouldn't attack the interior part of the Texas. They'd attack the outside. And I'm sorry, they would attack the outside of Clemson. That's really not where you want to go. Clemson has a very decent defense against outside zone. They have a very decent defense against power concepts that Sark wants to run. I just don't see that advantage there for them whatsoever. And then you go into Quinn Ewers. Now, Quinn Ewers is going to be the story here, right? I've just established the fact that his tackles are not going to get him the protection that he needs. And Quinn Ewers is getting worse with pressure this season. The better the teams are, the more mistakes that he has made. And then really where he has struggled is against cover one. For some reason, he cannot figure out what to do with that single high safety. I was at media day with a bunch of the Longhorns beat writers, and they were talking about some of the route trees where Quinn has problems with routes where the wide receivers stop, like curls, things like that. But when it comes to like go routes, he's pretty good at that. But cover one, he has a negative play rate of 12%. Usually that's a turnover or something bad is going to happen. Cover one is all that Clemson runs. Both sides of the ball, I see avenues for Clemson to cover this number. No reason for me to fire at 11.5. No reason for me to fire at 12. I'm going to see if that game day steam comes in, see if we can get a 13. I'd like to see if Kelvin Banks is fully healthy. He only played I think 7 snaps against Georgia in the SEC championship game. But the tackle position for Texas on the offensive line is a serious problem against this Clemson defense.
So there are so many matchups in this game that you see that Clemson can potentially take advantage of, and that's probably not reflected in something like my numbers, right? That is more overall team performance.
I mean, I full disclosure, I power rate the game Texas minus 14.5, and I take my power ratings extremely serious, and I think even SP Plus has us at 13, and you've seen this number get to 12 and it get nibbles, 11.5. You see it get nibbles in the market. I think there's other people out there that may be seeing the same things I do with the Texas offensive line.
Tell me more about Quinn Ewers. I see a guy that has pretty bad numbers when I'm looking at adjusted passing success rate, but when I watch him play, I think he's good. I think he had a really good game against Michigan in what turned out to be a pretty good defense. Overall, what do you think of him?
17 turnover-worthy plays this season. 12 of them came against Georgia and Texas A&M. So when he gets his toughest pass rushes, when he gets the toughest defenses, he seems to not be able to thread the needle. He is crumbling under pressure. These are not the same numbers that he had last year, Ed. And Carson Beck's sort of in a similar boat. Carson Beck has been more public about his problems, right? Like he's on Snapchat. He's worried about girls. He's got a Lamborghini. He's got a lot of off-field distractions going on. Quinn Ewers, you don't know about what's going on with him, but why is it that he's having so many more problems here this season in what I think is a better overall Texas team? I wonder if it more has to do with, is Arch Manning putting pressure on him? Does he have an agent in his ears that's saying there's pressure here to go to the NFL because you will not be the starter for Texas next year? Is he feeling the pressure of, shit, I'm going to have to transfer? If I don't go to the NFL, either me or Arch are going to transfer, and it's not going to be him. It could be pressure related, could be off-field related. His feet are not getting set. There are certain routes that he can't hit. I don't think he's NFL ready. Just from a tape perspective, I don't think he's NFL ready.
I'll tell you what Carson Beck's problems is. He doesn't have Ladd McConkey and Brock Bowers anymore.
Oh my God. Cheat codes, right? Absolutely.
Oh my God. Cheat codes. Those guys are just crushing the NFL.
Yeah. Yeah. Ladd McConkey. I was at I'll tell you something, man. I was at the national championship game. TCU 2 years ago. And Ladd McConkey was hurt, right? He didn't play in all those games leading up to it. I went out there 90 minutes before warm-up. I remember the spread against TCU was 13, and I was tweeting everybody. I was like, I'm kind of tweening. I want to see if Darnell Washington and tight end's healthy. I want to see if Ladd is healthy. Ladd comes out there, no pads, no nothing. Somebody throws a ball, 5 feet over his head. He jumps up like a pogo stick, grabs it one-handed, comes down, runs, and I start tweeting out, Ladd McConkey is fine. We're betting Georgia. He is such a cheat code. It's not even fair.
I forget, how did he do in that game?
Oh, I think Lad McConkey and
I
did
mean, he
did
did.
really well. I don't remember the exact stats, but he was the reason that. I mean, what was that game?
Yeah,
56. Yeah, they were
yeah,
smoking cigars with 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter on the sidelines. That's how good Georgia had the lead.
yeah. That was one of my favorite prop games because you could get Quentin Johnson. I think I got under 97.5
Uh
receiving
huh.
yards because he had that huge game against Michigan
Yeah,
and he
yeah.
had three
It's funny.
yards. It was great.
Yeah, now he was dropping passes for the chart. He's dropping passes like crazy in the NFL. That was, and I tell you what, I just the one prop I had on TCU in that game was a Max Duggan anytime TD, and that's the only TD that TCU scored. That was such a magical game.
Yeah. Let us move on to Tennessee at Ohio State. I think this one's going to be pretty awesome.
Yeah,
Ohio State's 7.5 point favorite. Very low total, 46.5. Kind of seems appropriate because these are two really good defenses. What are you seeing in this game?
I think Tennessee can win this game. I really do. Well, first off, it's like you think that the wide split stretch that Josh Heupel offense, it's just going to be a laser show with the throwing and Nico, but that's not what they are. They're a 61% rush rate team. Dylan Sampson, I mean, his last game against Vanderbilt, 178 yards on 25 carries. He averages 3.6 yards before he even gets touched. He's created 71 missed tackles. He is just an absolute force. They use inside zone. They use counter to get those defenses to kind of come out of their shoes. Ohio State's really been kind of mid FBS success rate wise in defending all of that. But there are problems for this Buckeyes defense. I mean, they're 53rd in broken tackles allowed. So I think Sampson and a long run is going to be in the forecast. If you can find a prop where like his longest run is over 27 yards or something like that, I would probably look at that. And then you go back to line yards. Remember, line yards is all about trench, and the Vols are top 10 and Ohio State's outside the top 50. So it should be Tennessee running over them and staying in early downs. And you want to do that because Nico Iamaleava, which I've got to learn that last name because his brother just committed to Arkansas and I'm an Arkansas alum. So I've got to get his last
Right?
name down.
Yeah.
You know, he ended the season. One stat that I can't get over with Nico is 2.9 seconds before release. Average is about 2.5, and you need to be faster than that. He's 2.9 on the season. It's just way too slow. And I think that's a factor with an offensive line that's 74th in pass blocking, and Ohio State has a great pass rush. So if Tennessee can stay in standard downs, if Dylan Sampson can get 4 yards per carry, which he should, that's going to keep Nico then getting out of these problems where he has pressured pockets. He failed. Nico failed to create a single big time throw and 99 dropbacks with pressure. So if Tennessee's in standard downs, they're going to be in scoring position and they're going to score. So that's definitely the handicap on that side. And then when you go to the other side, just the struggles of the offensive line, like does this time off give Ohio State the chance to get healthy after left tackle Josh Simmons was out for the year? They shuffled their left guard to left tackle. Seth McLaughlin got hurt. He just won the Remington. I think he's going to be okay. I think he's going to be able to go here, but we still have offensive linemen that are playing out of position, and that's a real problem against Tennessee. This defensive line, far above and beyond what I projected at the beginning of the season. They are so good against the run. They're so good against the pass. And Ohio State's offensive line is 94th in pass blocking. Tennessee's defensive line is so crazy aggressive under defensive coordinator Tim Banks. It's going to be a real problem here. Ohio State runs a heavy amount of inside zone. So they like to hand the ball off, to Judkins or Henderson and try to let them do some work in between the tackles. They do a little bit outside zone off the tackles, a little bit of man concepts, just lining up and trying to run it down your throat. And the Buckeyes do produce a huge amount of explosives outside zone, but that's not going to happen here because Tennessee has the highest success rate of any team that I've studied. They have a 70% success rate against outside zone, which means James Pierce, Joshua Josephs, absolutely dominating offensive tackles. And if you look at their numbers in PFF, they're two of the best run defenders in the nation at the edge positions. So that takes Ohio State away. That puts the game on Will Howard's shoulders and passing downs. I don't know if anybody's watched any football this year. Have you seen what Tennessee's defensive line does in passing downs? They are absolutely nuts. They'll send 4, they'll drop back 7. Will Howard, when he has pressure, 1 big time throw, 6 turnover worthy plays. And plus, we go back to the contested catch, Ed. I'm really big on do you force wide receivers to struggle to get a clean ball? Tennessee is 24th in creating contested catches, and that's really a testament to Heupel. I will say I was completely wrong on this Tennessee secondary preseason. They lost all their starters. They lost their second string starters in the secondary. They have great coverage numbers. They have great contested catch numbers. I think that speaks to to what Josh Heupel is able to do there. So both sides of the ball, I think Dylan Sampson, that Tennessee offensive line is just going to have their way. They're going to keep Nico out of passing downs. And then on the other side of the ball, Ohio State's outside zone is just going to get neutralized completely. And if Tennessee's able to pin their ears back and go after Will Howard, it's going to be bad. So I agree on the under, though. I do agree on the under. I think Tennessee's offense is going to be methodical, not explosive. And Ohio State, I'm struggling to find ways that they get into scoring position.
Collin Wilson, thank you so much for your time. Please let everyone know where they can get all your good work.
Yeah, you guys can find my written work over at actionnetwork.com. My Twitter handle is @_Collin, COLLIN 1. And then we have our BBOC podcast. Stucky and I will break down every single bowl, just like we do. We break down UMass and UConn football. We'll get it from every angle. So you can go and find us there.
You've been listening to the Football Analytics Show. My name is Ed Fang, your host. Just a reminder, you can grab 5 Nuggets Saturday, my sports betting newsletter, at thepowerrank.com. Thanks again for listening.